Emily Foster bolted upright in bed, heart pounding as the shrill blare of her security alarm tore through the sticky midnight silence. The digital clock blinked 2:03 a.m., its blue light barely piercing the dense, humid air inside her small apartment above Prairie Hearth Bakery. Los Alamos wasn't known for trouble, but tonight, something was different. The tension seemed to coil in the darkness outside, wrapping tight around Emily's chest. She stumbled toward the window, bare feet finding familiar knots in the hardwood floor. Through the rippled glass, the neon open sign sputtered, casting flickers across the dusty street and the cracked blacktop parking lot below. Beyond, shadows pooled at the base of the sagging fence, stretching like fingers across the scrubby yard. She squinted. There, a quick, jerky movement. Someone was in her yard. For a moment, Emily froze, paralyzed by the weight of old fears. Memories surged, her father's rough hands, the endless empty rooms after her mother left, the echo of loneliness that never really left, even after 49 years and a messy divorce. She hugged her father's old flannel shirt tight around her, the faded fabric a shield against the chill inside her soul. The security lights snapped on, slicing the darkness. In that instant, she saw a hooded figure darting for the back door. Adrenaline surged. Emily's breath shook as she fumbled for her phone, fingers trembling, ready to dial 911. But then, a thunderous, wild sound ripped through the yard. Hooves pounded the earth, sharp and primal. Out of the darkness, a horse, a powerful brown Mustang, barreled between the intruder and the house, snorting, eyes wide with both fear and purpose. The would-be burglar stumbled back, startled, nearly falling as the horse charged, stamping and tossing its mane, herding the shadow away from the back steps with fearless urgency. The figure took off running, vanishing down the alley. Emily stood at the window breathless, watching as the Mustang circled the yard, nostrils flaring, tail lashing at the night. What in the world? Emily's hands shook harder now, but with awe, not fear. Who was this animal, and why had it protected her? She pressed her forehead to the cool glass, watching as the horse slowed, its sides heaving, sweat gleaming beneath the streetlights. The Mustang seemed to scan the yard before finally turning toward the gate, standing guard as if daring anyone else to try. Emily's phone buzzed in her hand, an automated alert from the security company, but she couldn't tear her eyes away from the horse. Her mind spun with family stories, her father's tales of animal intuition, the wild horses he'd respected more than most people. She remembered how, as a girl, she'd wished for something magical, something to break the cycle of fear and loss. The animal stood there, proud and battered, an apparition from another world. Should she call animal control? The urge to be responsible warred with something deeper, a flicker of kinship, a recognition of loneliness. She hesitated, lowering the phone. Instead, she pressed her palm to the window and whispered, "Thank you." The words slipped into the hot desert wind, lost among the distant howls of coyotes and the steady hum of summer insects. As the Mustang finally slipped away into the shadows, Emily felt a ripple of hope beneath her anxiety. Maybe this was a sign. Maybe, just maybe, something was about to change. But as the adrenaline faded, a deeper unease took hold. Who was the stranger? Would they return? And what would happen to the horse if the town found out? A wild Mustang, dangerous and out of place, right at her doorstep. She watched the darkness long after the horse disappeared, the quiet settling heavy on her shoulders. Yet somewhere beneath that weight, for the first time in a long while, Emily felt a small, impossible sense of safety, like she wasn't alone after all. Dawn was still hours away, and she had decisions to make. But as she crawled back into bed, she caught herself humming an old lullaby, her father's voice echoing in memory. Out there, in the night, a wild horse had protected her. And for a heartbeat, in the glow of neon and fear, hope had come galloping in on 4 battered hooves. By sunrise, the sticky remnants of the night's panic had already started to harden into rumor. Prairie Hearth Bakery, usually bustling at dawn with the sleepy chatter of regulars and the comforting aroma of Emily's sourdough, now hummed with nervous tension. Outside, the pink light broke across the scrubby desert, throwing long shadows across faded flyers hastily taped to the street lamp. Dangerous wild horse, stay alert. Inside, Emily stood behind the counter, hands raw from kneading dough, the deep ache in her chest sharper than ever. People trickled in, neighbors she'd known for years, but the air was different. Some offered sidelong glances, their greetings clipped and wary. A couple she recognized from the church council stood near the register, whispering as they watched the window, as if expecting the wild Mustang to crash through at any moment. Emily's divorce had already cast her as something of an outsider. The bakery, meant to be her sanctuary, now felt like a fragile line between acceptance and being pushed out for good. She tried to focus on simple things, the crisp lines of a fresh croissant, the steamy comfort of coffee in a chipped mug, but every time the bell above the door jingled, her heart leapt. Was it animal control? Was it the hooded figure from the night before, coming back for more? A cluster of nervous faces pressed together by the pastry case. Linda Harper, always impeccably dressed, pearls straining against her throat, swept into the bakery, taking command of the room with just a look. Linda was the head of the neighborhood association, unofficial mayor, professional rumor monger, and the last person Emily wanted to see right now. "Emily," Linda called out, her voice bright as glass, "we need to talk." Emily straightened, wiping her hands on her apron. "Morning, Linda." "Is it true?" Linda asked, pitching her voice so everyone could hear. "There was a wild horse right outside your bakery last night?" Emily hesitated, eyes locked on her from every angle. She forced herself to nod. "There was. It chased off a burglar, actually." A ripple of incredulity and alarm ran through the crowd. Someone muttered, "See? Dangerous." Another woman clutching her son's hand whispered, "What if it comes back while the kids are here?" Linda pressed on. "We can't have wild animals roaming our neighborhood, Emily. It's a safety risk." "I've already called animal control. We're organizing a petition. The horse needs to be caught and removed before someone gets hurt." Heat rose to Emily's cheeks. "It's not hurting anyone. Last night it protected me." Linda's eyes narrowed. "Or maybe you were lucky. Next time it could be different. Don't let your personal problems endanger this community." Emily felt the familiar ache of exclusion, that old wound of never quite belonging. She wanted to shout, to explain, to tell them how the horse had seemed lost and scared just like her, but the words tangled in her throat. By mid-morning, the bakery was ringed with nervous energy and caution tape. Animal control trucks patrolled the side streets and Linda's flyers flapped in the desert wind. Regular customers stopped coming, afraid of the rogue Mustang. Even deliveries arrived late, drivers peering around as if a wild beast might leap from the shadows. But every night, like clockwork, the brown horse returned. Emily watched from her upstairs window, breath held tight as the Mustang paced the edge of her yard, never wandering far, always alert. Animal control tried everything, tranquilizer darts, grain traps, even calling in a local wrangler. But each time, the horse slipped away, silent and clever, vanishing into the maze of alleys and scrub. And yet, no matter what the town did, the Mustang would always appear near the bakery again, as if it belonged there, as if it was guarding Emily, not just haunting her. She felt the strain mounting inside her, the pull between loyalty to her town, a place that for all its flaws had once given her a second chance, and the inexplicable empathy she felt for the animal. In the quiet hours before dawn, Emily would sit alone, staring at the half-lit sign above the bakery, wondering why she cared so much for a creature she barely knew. One night, after another failed attempt by animal control, Emily found herself standing by her back fence, holding a battered bucket and a bag of apples. The desert air was heavy with the scent of sage. She paused, then placed the bucket and apples just beyond the fence, in the cool moonlit grass. A silent olive branch offered without words. She watched from the shadows as the Mustang approached, ears pricked, limping slightly. It sniffed the bucket, then glanced up at her, eyes dark and wary. Emily felt her chest tighten, a mix of fear, hope, and something old and familiar. The Mustang crunched an apple, standing just close enough for Emily to see a scar curling beneath its mane. Somewhere, deep down, she knew she was breaking the rules. The town wanted the horse gone. Linda wanted her gone too, if she was honest. But as she watched the wild animal eat, Emily couldn't turn away. She whispered into the darkness, voice trembling with loneliness and defiance, "You're safe here, for now." Inside the bakery, the dough continued to rise. The next day would bring more stares, more gossip, maybe more trouble. But that night, under the restless desert sky, Emily made a silent promise, to herself and to the wild horse, that she would not let fear win, no matter what the town decided. A new bond had begun to form, not with words, but with small acts of kindness, and the stubborn hope that maybe, just maybe, neither of them was truly alone. The world was slow to wake, the first slant of morning sun pouring gold across the dusty windowsill as Emily sat on the bakery's creaking front steps, clutching a chipped mug of coffee. Her bones ached, not just from the early hours, but from the worry that seemed to settle deeper every day. The bakery behind her was still. No customers yet, just the scent of rising dough and cooling air. Out past the fence, in the knee-high grasses at the edge of the lot, the brown Mustang grazed. Emily had started calling him Buck. The name slipped out one evening as she watched him, a relic of childhood summers spent on her grandparents' ranch outside Amarillo. She'd never meant to name him, but now it felt right, as if naming the horse tethered her own drifting spirit to the earth a little more. Buck limped slightly, favoring his left hind leg. Emily watched, breath held, as he circled closer to the fence, then paused, head down, ears flicking. She knew not to approach. Buck was wary, his body language sharp with old fear. She respected that. They began a new kind of ritual. Emily with her coffee on the steps, Buck grazing a little closer each dawn. Silent companions to the waking world. The routine soothed her. In the bakery, she found herself humming old songs, tunes her grandmother used to sing as they fed the horses or braided her hair with wildflowers. The sound felt strange in her throat, rusty and sweet. She wondered sometimes if Buck could hear the notes floating out the window and if he remembered songs of his own. One morning as Buck grazed near the fence, Emily noticed a faded brand on his shoulder, a mark barely visible beneath his coarse coat. She felt a tug of curiosity. Ranch horses in these parts were rare, and strays usually didn't wander this close to town. Had someone lost him? Had he been abandoned? After the morning rush, Emily slipped into the bakery's office and dug through local ranch registries online, cross-checking brands and missing livestock reports. Hours passed in a haze of clicking and note-taking, her mind darting between hope and dread. The mystery of Buck's past gnawed at her. Was someone out there searching for him? Or was he a ghost, set adrift by tragedy? She came up empty, save for a handful of scattered references, an old stable fire up near Santa Fe, a few therapy horses gone missing after an evacuation, but no clear answers. The idea of Buck as a therapy horse stuck in her mind, echoing with memories she'd tried hard to bury. Her brother, Thomas, had been a Marine. After he came home, changed by things he couldn't speak of, Emily remembered how the only place he found peace was on horseback, quiet rides at dusk, her brother's tense shoulders softening with every mile. Horses, she realized, had a kind of magic, healing wounds no doctor could see. That evening, Emily lingered by the fence, humming the lullaby again. Buck's ears twitched, and for the first time, he lifted his head and let out a low, rumbling nicker, deep and uncertain, but unmistakably directed at her. Emily felt a thrill race through her chest. She responded softly, her voice carrying across the grass. "It's okay, Buck. You're safe." In the days that followed, their silent friendship grew. Emily left apples, water, and the occasional slice of warm bread by the fence. Buck inched closer, sometimes standing just a few yards away, his big eyes watching her every move. On rare afternoons when the bakery was quiet, she'd sit on the porch and read aloud, mostly from old ranch stories and worn-out poetry books, words falling into the quiet space between them. Once, as she cleaned up outside, Buck ventured so close that Emily could see the burrs tangled in his mane and the scars tracing his flank. She wanted to reach out to help him, but she remembered her grandfather's warning. You can't force a wild soul to trust you. You have to wait and let them decide. In those moments, she saw herself reflected in Buck. The old wounds, the instinct to run, the longing for a place to belong. The town still buzzed with anxiety, and Linda's campaign against Buck only seemed to grow. Flyers multiplied, warnings got louder, and customers sometimes crossed the street rather than risk passing the fence. Emily felt the pressure closing in, but every time she saw Buck, she felt her resolve harden. One especially quiet dawn, Emily found Buck standing by the fence, watching her with cautious curiosity. She sat on the steps, wrapped in her father's flannel, and began to sing her grandmother's lullaby, soft and simple. Buck's ears pricked forward, and he let out a slow breath, nostrils flaring as if scenting something comforting and familiar. They sat in silence as the sun rose, the world holding its breath. For a brief moment, Emily felt the heavy ache of loneliness ease, replaced by a fragile thread of connection, a lifeline she hadn't known she still needed. Inside the bakery, the oven timer chimed. Emily stood, dusted off her jeans, and whispered, "See you tomorrow, Buck." He blinked, turned, and limped back into the tall grass, his silhouette framed by the gold and blue of a new day. That evening, as she finished closing up, Emily saw Buck waiting at the fence again. She left out a fresh bucket of water, an extra apple, and an old, battered brush. Buck didn't come close enough to touch, but as the stars began to appear, she felt the distance between them shrink, inch by inch. For the first time in years, Emily let herself hope that healing, real, slow, stubborn healing, was possible. For both of them, a gentle summer rain tapped its steady rhythm on the bakery's tin roof, muting the world outside. The usual rattle of early morning traffic faded, replaced by the soft hiss of falling water and the low hum of ovens warming up inside Prairie Hearth. Emily found herself lingering in the lull. No customers yet, just the promise of fresh bread and the shy hope that Buck would appear at the fence as he always did now. This morning, though, Buck stood in the drizzle, his coat streaked dark with rain. Emily, umbrella in hand, made her way outside. She paused at the fence, watching him chew thoughtfully on the last apple she'd left. He looked tired, a little thinner, the limp in his hind leg more pronounced. Emily's heart squeezed tight. "I'm not going to hurt you," she said softly, her breath fogging in the damp air. She stepped closer, offering an open palm. Buck snorted, wary but not afraid, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, he inched forward. The rain masked the world in gentle static. For a moment, it was just the two of them, the past suspended. As Buck drew closer, Emily reached out, fingers trembling, and began to gently untangle burrs from his mane. Beneath the mud and knots, her hand brushed over old scars, ridges of healed wounds. She murmured comforting nonsense, voice breaking a little as she worked. There was something braided into his mane, a faded plastic tag almost hidden among the dark hair. Emily fished it out, brushing rain from the numbers stamped on its side. Inside, she dried the tag with a towel and sat down at her laptop, searching every registry she could find. Her hands shook as she typed, the weight of memory pressing hard on her chest. It didn't take long before a record popped up, a therapy horse named Buck, once part of a veteran rehabilitation program near Santa Fe. The program had closed after a devastating stable fire. Several horses vanished during the chaos, assumed dead or sold off in secret. One, the registry noted, was marked as unaccounted for. Therapy-trained brown Mustang gelding, visible scar, mild limp. Emily's mind reeled. She remembered her brother Thomas, remembered the tight lines of his jaw after Iraq, the way he only found peace on horseback. After he passed, lost to pain she couldn't touch, Emily buried herself in work, walling off that piece of her heart. Now, with Buck in her yard, it felt like that wound was being reopened, not to cause more pain, but to let something healing in. She returned to Buck with a handful of fresh towels and an old first aid kit. Rain still fell, a gentle patter on her shoulders. This time, Buck didn't flinch when she approached. Emily cleaned the dirt from his coat, checked his limp, and pressed her forehead against his side, feeling the slow, steady thunder of his heartbeat. "You've been through hell, haven't you, boy?" she whispered, tears sliding down her cheeks to mix with the rain. For the first time, Buck didn't pull away. He lowered his head, pressing his warm, damp nose into her shoulder. Just for a moment, just enough for Emily to feel something crack open inside. Later that evening, after the bakery closed, Emily found herself sitting on the back steps, memories drifting like smoke. The tag from Buck's mane sat heavy in her hand. She thought of all the soldiers, her brother, the men and women who passed through her bakery with haunted eyes. How many had found hope in horses like Buck? How many had lost it again when programs shut down or trauma proved too heavy to bear? She brushed Buck's coat, taking her time, letting the rhythm steady her breathing. "You're safe now," she murmured, each word a vow. The horse's ears flicked. He turned his great head, meeting her gaze. In those dark, gentle eyes, Emily saw pain, yes, but also the stubborn spark of survival. The same spark she'd seen in the mirror too many times. The rain eased, and a breeze stirred the tall grass. For the first time since her brother's death, Emily let herself weep openly, her tears falling onto Buck's mane. She felt something shift inside her, a sense that maybe, just maybe, neither of them had to carry their scars alone. That night, as thunder rolled in the distance, Emily sat beside Buck under the awning, the bakery's lights spilling warm gold across the wet yard. The world felt smaller somehow, just the sound of rain, the scent of bread, the quiet comfort of another living soul nearby. Emily closed her eyes, remembering her brother's laugh, her grandmother's lullaby, the steady, grounding presence of horses in the chaos of childhood. She thought about all that Buck had survived, the fire, abandonment, fear, about how, through it all, he'd found his way to her. Maybe it wasn't fate. Maybe it was just two broken things finding each other in a world that so often forgets how to heal. As the storm finally faded, Emily pressed a soft kiss to Buck's nose. "You're not lost anymore," she whispered, voice raw, "and neither am I." Buck let out a low nicker, nudging her gently, as if agreeing. The past wasn't gone, and the scars would always be there. But under the soft hush of rain and the watchful glow of the bakery lights, Emily knew that healing, slow, painful, stubborn, had finally begun, for both of them. It started with whispers. By late morning, the front walk of Prairie Hearth was dotted with small knots of townspeople, some holding coffee cups, others folding their arms as if bracing for a storm. Emily noticed them from her spot behind the counter, her hands kneading dough, but her mind far from the rhythm of baking. There was a low thrum in the air, the sense of something about to break. Linda Harper arrived first, heels clicking on the wet pavement, hair perfectly coiffed even after the rain. She strode past the bakery's regulars, her voice ringing out, "We need to talk, Emily." There was no warmth in her words, only a stern determination that brooked no argument. Emily wiped her hands and stepped outside, the scent of yeast and cinnamon following her. The crowd had grown. Neighbors, business owners, even a few teenagers who hovered near the curb, cell phones raised, waiting for drama. The whole town seemed to have gathered at her doorstep, fear and curiosity mixing in the dusty sunlight. Linda wasted no time. "We've all seen the flyers, the broken windows. This animal," she gestured sharply toward the field where Buck stood grazing, "is a threat to this community. You're harboring a dangerous, unpredictable creature." Emily felt the old surge of powerlessness rise in her chest, the same feeling she'd known as a child in a fractured home, and later through a marriage that left her invisible. But now, something was different. She squared her shoulders, remembering the weight of Buck's head on her shoulder, the trust they'd built in rain and silence. "Buck isn't dangerous," Emily replied, voice shaking but strong. "He's not what you think." Linda's eyes narrowed. "Tell that to the parents who are afraid to let their kids walk past your bakery. Tell that to the insurance company that called this morning." A teenager, Jake, the Harper boy, shifted at the edge of the crowd. He picked up a rock, hefted it, and before Emily could react, hurled it toward Buck. The stone arced through the air. Buck, startled, reared back, hooves churning the earth but didn't run. Instead, he stood his ground, eyes wide and wild, muscles trembling but unmoving. The crowd gasped. Emily felt something in her snap. She rushed forward, standing between Buck and the crowd, arms outstretched. "Stop it!" she shouted, voice ragged. "He's done nothing to deserve this." For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Sheriff Rick Torres, usually slow to act, a man who preferred paperwork to confrontation, pushed through the crowd. He looked tired, uniform rumpled, but his gaze was steady. "Let's take a look at something," he said quietly. He gestured Emily inside. She followed, heart hammering, as the crowd buzzed behind them. Inside the bakery, Torres asked Emily to pull up the security footage from the night of the break-in. They watched together. The grainy image of the intruder, the sudden appearance of Buck, the way the horse had placed himself between danger and the door. Torres leaned back, arms crossed. "He wasn't attacking. He was protecting you." Emily nodded, swallowing back tears. "He saved me." Torres was silent for a long moment, then nodded. "I'll keep an eye on him. And you." His tone softened, a quiet support passing between them. Outside, the mood had shifted. Among the faces in the crowd, Emily noticed a few who looked thoughtful instead of hostile. People like Mrs. Garcia, whose husband struggled with nightmares, Mike, the mechanic who'd lost a friend in Afghanistan, and young Lily, who'd been bullied at school and found solace in the bakery's warmth. They didn't say much, but their eyes met Emily's, offering a glimmer of solidarity. Linda, undeterred, waved her petition in the air. "We're not done here. I'll take this to the city council if I have to." Emily faced her, calm and unyielding. "Do what you have to do, Linda. But Buck stays. He's not hurting anyone." The crowd began to thin, some shaking their heads, others deep in conversation. A few lingered, approaching Emily quietly to thank her for standing up, for not turning Buck out. One old rancher, his hands rough and voice low, said, "That horse has got heart. Sometimes that's all any of us have." Later that afternoon, Emily stood beside Buck in the fading sun, running her hand along his scarred neck. The field was quiet, the storm of confrontation settled, for now. She breathed deep, feeling her fear give way to a new, hard-won strength. As dusk fell, Emily noticed Sheriff Torres parking his cruiser across the street, his presence a silent promise. The support from a handful of townsfolk, small, fragile, but real, began to take root. Emily realized that Buck wasn't the only one being judged for his scars. for his history. The town's fear was as much about their own wounds as it was about a horse. Emily knelt beside Buck, pressing her forehead to his warm shoulder. "You're not alone anymore," she whispered. "Neither am I." The world wasn't suddenly safe, and the battle wasn't over. But as the stars blinked on above the bakery and the desert wind rattled the flyers on the fence, Emily felt the first stirrings of hope. They would face whatever came next, together. The uneasy calm that settled over Prairie Hearth after the confrontation didn't last long. By the following night, trouble returned with a new edge, one that cut deeper than gossip or angry whispers. Emily was locking up after a slow evening, the bakery quiet except for the tick of the clock and the faint sound of Buck shifting in the grass outside. As she turned off the last light, she noticed a pale envelope wedged beneath the door. It was cheap stationery, her name scrawled in shaky block letters. She opened it with cold hands. "Get rid of the horse or we will." No signature, no clue who had written it, but the threat lingered in the air, thick and mean. Emily glanced toward the dark field where Buck stood, his shape barely visible under the sliver of moon. Her heart pounded. She locked the doors, checked the windows twice, but she knew there was no real way to keep danger out, not when it came from her own neighbors. She tried to sleep, but the house was restless. Every creak made her sit up, listening for footsteps. Out the window, she caught sight of Buck pacing the fence line, nose to the wind, ears twitching. He seemed agitated, unsettled by something she couldn't see. Around 2 a.m. the sound came, a sharp, splintering crack. Emily jumped out of bed and hurried to the window just in time to see shadows flit past the bakery. Then, with a crash that split the night, glass shattered. Someone had hurled rocks through the bakery's front windows. In the sickly yellow wash of the street lamp, she saw spray paint slashed across her sign. "Freaks not welcome." Emily rushed downstairs, adrenaline making her hands shake so hard she dropped her phone. She pushed through the front door and saw the damage, jagged holes in the window, shards glinting on the floor, angry red paint dripping onto the steps. The vandals were already gone, but the air still pulsed with their hatred. Buck stood nearby, tense and alert, his sides heaving. As Emily stepped into the debris, he let out a deep, guttural sound, a warning. Then she saw it, dark spots staining the grass by the steps, blood, fresh and bright. Panic clamped her throat. "Buck!" she called, voice breaking. She hurried to his side and saw a gash on his shoulder, blood oozing down his leg. He must have tried to drive off the vandals protecting the bakery and been injured for his trouble. Emily pressed her forehead to Buck's mane, tears stinging her eyes. She grabbed a clean towel from the kitchen and did her best to stop the bleeding, whispering soothing nonsense into the night. Buck stood rock still, breathing slow and deep as if determined not to show pain. When the adrenaline finally faded, Emily found herself on her knees in the ruined bakery, sweeping up glass as the first streaks of sunrise colored the sky. Buck stayed by the door, head pressed against her back, his silent weight a comfort that words couldn't match. With every sweep of the broom, Emily felt anger boiling inside her, at the cowardice, the cruelty, the way fear twisted people she'd once called friends. Later that morning, Sheriff Torres stopped by, hat in hand. He surveyed the damage, jaw tight. "You should report this," he said, though they both knew justice in a small town could be slow and selective. "I already did," Emily replied, voice hoarse from lack of sleep. "But I doubt it'll go anywhere." Torres knelt beside Buck, examining the wound. "He's tough. But he's not invincible, Emily. Neither are you." He paused, glancing up. "Maybe you should let him go." Emily shook her head. "He's all I have left. I won't send him away. Not for them." The sheriff studied her for a long moment, then nodded. I'll have a cruiser drive by at night. That's all I can promise." Before he left, he reached out and, unexpectedly, rested a hand on her shoulder. "You're not alone in this. Remember that." After he was gone, Emily went back to Buck. She cleaned his wound as best she could, crooning old lullabies, her voice trembling but steady. Buck leaned into her, eyelids heavy, trusting her completely. As dusk fell, Emily sat beneath the broken sign, her legs stretched out in the dust, Buck at her side. Together they watched the sun sink below the horizon, the world turning violet and gold. She felt battered, exhausted, but strangely whole. A survivor, side by side with another survivor. The bakery would need new glass, a new sign. Maybe the town would never see her or Buck as anything but outcasts. But as she looked into Buck's dark eyes, saw the flicker of gratitude and fierce loyalty there, Emily knew that sometimes the things most worth saving are those the world tries hardest to break. Beneath the shattered neon, with Buck's warm breath steady at her back, Emily whispered into the gathering night, "They don't get to decide who belongs here. We do." And as darkness settled in, she finally believed it. A sharp knock rattled the bakery's battered front door just after sunrise. Emily, half awake and still sweeping shards of glass from the previous night's attack, felt her heart lurch. She wiped dust from her hands and opened the door to find a stranger, an older woman in pressed jeans and boots, a clipboard tucked beneath one arm, and the kind of determined set to her jaw that only came from years of dealing with unruly livestock and tougher people. "I'm Alice Monroe, from the New Mexico Therapy Ranch Board," the woman said, eyes scanning the bakery, then drifting out to the field where Buck grazed under the soft morning sun. "We need to talk about that horse." Emily's world seemed to slow. The familiar anxiety spiking, another threat, another person ready to take Buck away. She squared her shoulders, pushing down the fear, and nodded for Alice to come inside. Alice wasted no time. "We have records. Buck is registered as a therapy animal, property of the state after the fire. By law, he needs to be returned to our custody. I have legal papers. If you refuse, animal control will be here by nightfall." Emily bristled, a surge of helplessness running through her, but instead of folding, she steadied herself and drew in a long, shaky breath. "He's not a piece of equipment," she said, voice trembling but strong. "He's been through enough. He deserves a home. Peace." Alice's expression softened, just a flicker, but she pressed on. "This isn't about punishment. We're responsible for therapy animals' safety. He needs evaluation, medical care, retraining." Emily held up a folder of her own. "He's been getting care," she said. "Here are vet records. He's been injured by vandals, not by me. And here," she pointed to a thumb drive on the counter, "is security footage. Buck protected me from a break-in, not the other way around." There was a new strength in Emily, born of exhaustion and stubborn love. "Ask around town. He's not a danger. He's a survivor, like a lot of us." Alice hesitated, eyes flicking over the neat row of stitches in Buck's shoulder visible through the bakery window, the makeshift bandage, and the bucket of apples at his feet. Still, she set her jaw. "I'll have to file a report. The sheriff will have to be involved." As if on cue, Sheriff Torres stepped inside, hat in hand. "I've seen the footage, Alice," he said quietly. "That horse isn't going anywhere tonight. Emily's done right by him." The three stood in tense silence. Emily clung to the counter, bracing herself for another round of bureaucracy, more threats. It was then that the bakery door swung open again, bell jingling. A man stood in the doorway, mid-30s, hair cropped short, army jacket faded from sun and memory. He walked with a limp and the kind of haunted look Emily recognized instantly. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, voice rough. "I'm David Miller. I knew Buck back at the therapy ranch after I came home." He glanced at Emily, then Alice. He's the only reason I'm still here. Alice looked stunned. You're sure? David nodded. That ranch was good for a while, but after the fire, everything changed. They couldn't care for the animals. I saw things. Horses neglected, resources stretched thin. Buck was always gentle, always looking out for the other horses, and for us. David's voice caught. After the fire, a lot of the horses were marked for euthanasia. I tried to get him out, but he disappeared. It's a miracle he's still alive, let alone helping someone else. The bakery was silent. Even Alice seemed shaken by the weight of David's testimony. We have protocols, David, she murmured, but her voice lacked conviction. Protocols? David shot back. This horse saved my life, and now he's helping someone else. Isn't that what your board is supposed to be about? Sheriff Torres, eyes gentle, spoke up. Sometimes the law needs to listen to what's right, not just what's written. Outside, a handful of townsfolk had gathered, drawn by the commotion and the long-standing rumor mill. But something had shifted since the vandalism. Mrs. Garcia stood holding her grandson's hand. Mike, the mechanic, nodded silently at Emily. The crowd was smaller than those that had jeered and shouted before, but there was a current of sympathy, a quiet solidarity. Alice Monroe stood at the threshold, watching Buck graze. The legal papers in her hand trembled, just a little. I'll need to make some calls, she finally said, voice weary. But I'll hold off on enforcement for now. I want to see Buck's vet, hear what the town has to say, talk to more people. Emily's relief was immediate and almost overwhelming. She reached for David's hand, squeezed it tight, a thank you and an apology for what he'd been through. Buck, sensing the mood, wandered to the edge of the lot and nickered softly, head low in the golden light. That evening, as the sky blushed orange and the town settled into another uneasy peace, Emily found herself sitting on the bakery steps beside David and Buck. They didn't talk much. Words weren't necessary. They watched the stars blink awake above Los Alamos, a trio of survivors, each with their scars, each learning that sometimes the most powerful rescue is the one that brings you home to yourself. The battle wasn't over, but for the first time, Emily believed they might win. The night Prairie Hearth became a battlefield was one Emily would never forget. Summer had deepened, thickening the New Mexico air, the smell of sage and warm bread tangled together under the bakery's patched neon. For the first time in weeks, the windows were repaired, the sign mostly scrubbed clean, and a fragile sense of normalcy had begun to settle. Though it was as delicate as the layer of powdered sugar Emily dusted over her morning buns, yet beneath the calm, tension simmered. Emily felt it in the way her regulars lingered by the counter, voices hushed, eyes flickering to the door. She felt it in Buck's restlessness, the way he paced near the fence, head tossing at the slightest noise. Even the coyotes in the hills seemed to howl longer, as if warning that peace never lasts long in a town divided by fear. As dusk fell, the bakery was busier than usual. Mrs. Garcia and her grandson played checkers in the corner. David Miller sat by the window, nursing coffee and watching Buck through the glass. Sheriff Torres came in for his nightly cinnamon roll, offering Emily a smile, thin, tired, but real. Then came a sound, shattering, unmistakable, a pane of glass breaking in the alley behind the bakery. Emily's heart seized. Customers froze. David jumped to his feet, eyes narrowing with old reflexes. Before anyone could react, two figures in dark hoodies tried forcing the back door, shouts echoing through the alley. The memory of the last attack flashed through Emily's mind. The slurs painted on the sign, the letter, Buck's blood on the grass. But this time, Buck was ready. From the side yard, Buck charged, powerful and wild. He planted himself between the bakery door and the would-be intruders, snorting and pawing at the ground, muscles tense beneath his scarred hide. The men hesitated, eyes wide. Buck reared up, hooves slicing the air, and let out a sound that was more warning than threat, a deep, primal bellow that shook the fence and sent one of the men stumbling back. The second tried to skirt around him. Buck spun, blocking the way, taking a blow to his flank from a pipe, an ugly metallic thud. But he didn't back down. Inside, Emily screamed for someone to call the police. Sheriff Torres was already on his radio. David raced outside, brandishing a broom. Mrs. Garcia herded her grandson beneath the table. The scene spiraled into chaos. Glass shattered, someone yelled. Buck lashed out with his hind legs. For a heartbeat, it looked like the intruders would get past him, but Buck held firm, bleeding but unbroken. The sound of sirens grew louder, flashing red and blue across the lot. The attackers scrambled, one slipping on broken glass and the other darting through the alley, but Buck's presence bought enough time for the crowd inside to stay safe, and for Sheriff Torres to give chase. The bakery door burst open as Emily and David rushed outside. Buck, trembling, was bleeding from a fresh wound on his leg. Emily fell to her knees beside him, hands shaking, pressing her forehead to his neck. "Stay with me, Buck, please, stay with me," she begged, her voice hoarse with terror and love. Buck's legs folded, and he collapsed on the cool dirt, breath ragged. The crowd spilled outside. Mrs. Garcia, her grandson, Mike the mechanic, Lily and her mom, all drawn by the violence and the animal who'd just risked everything for them. At that moment, Alice Monroe arrived, trailed by a local equine vet. She'd brought the final set of papers, expecting to claim Buck for the ranch, but what she saw instead was a horse, battered and bleeding, surrounded by townsfolk, none of them seeing a threat anymore, only a hero. David, face pale, turned to Alice. "He saved my life once. Tonight he saved this town. If you take him now, after everything, you'll never convince anyone your program is about healing." Alice faltered, papers slipping from her grasp. She watched as the vet knelt beside Buck, examining the wound. The crowd waited, breathless. Emily refused to leave Buck's side, cradling his head in her lap, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You're not taking him," Emily said, her voice trembling but steel underneath. "Not now, not ever." The vet looked up. "He's badly hurt, but if we get him to the center now, I think we can save him." Alice nodded, voice rough. "We'll do it, my treat, for everything he's given. And he comes back here, to Emily, when he's healed. That's my word." Relief swept through the crowd, and through Emily most of all. She held Buck's head as they loaded him into the trailer, never letting go, whispering promises and lullabies. As the trailer pulled away, Emily rode in the back with him, one hand resting on his scarred neck, vowing that no matter what, she would never give up on him. Prairie Hearth stood silent in the aftermath, the scent of bread mingling with fear and hope. The town had witnessed something undeniable, courage that transcended scars, love that refused to yield. And in that moment, as the stars blinked on overhead, something in Los Alamos changed for good. Buck's recovery at Los Alamos Equine Center unfolded slowly, quietly, a sharp contrast to the chaos that had brought him there. The sterile brightness of the barn felt foreign after the rough edges of Prairie Hearth. Yet, as the days passed, something remarkable began to happen. The townspeople, who once feared Buck, now filled his stall with cards, fresh apples, and even a battered old guitar from Mike the mechanic, who claimed horses liked music as much as people did. Emily barely left Buck's side. She camped on a folding chair outside his stall, sometimes sleeping upright, arms crossed and eyes half open, just to be there in case he needed comfort. The bakery ran on a skeleton crew. Mrs. Garcia and Lily's mom covered the counter, refusing any payment, determined that Emily's only job was healing, not baking. Mornings were the hardest. The trauma of that night, the attack, the blood, the frantic ride in the trailer haunted Emily's dreams. But every sunrise brought a new gift, a small note tucked into Buck's feed bucket. "You're our hero, love, Lily." A wildflower arrangement tied with a child's shoelace, a bag of sugar cubes from the Veterans Support Group. Emily realized that in his pain, Buck had become a bridge, a living symbol for anyone who'd ever felt cast aside. Still, there were hours when the barn was quiet and hope seemed thin. Emily watched the world through the gaps in Buck's stall, turning her life over in her mind. The bruising loneliness after her divorce, the endless struggle to keep Prairie Hearth afloat, the fear that had once ruled her every step. She understood Buck's wounds, visible and hidden. Each scar was a story, each limp a memory of running from something you couldn't name. David Miller visited often, sitting on an overturned bucket with his hands clasped and gaze steady on Buck. On one of those afternoons, as sunlight streamed through the slats, he spoke in a voice stripped bare of pretense. "When I got back from Afghanistan, I didn't think I could be around people again. I'd wake up at night, sweating, shaking, angry for no reason. I almost—" His voice faded, throat tight. Then Buck showed up. He didn't judge. He didn't flinch when I yelled. He just stood there. "I guess sometimes all you need is for someone, or something, not to leave." Emily nodded, her own eyes burning. "I lost my brother after he came home. Couldn't reach him. Sometimes I wonder if it's true what my dad said, that horses know things we don't, that they can carry things for us." David smiled, the lines in his face softening. "Maybe that's why Buck found you." There in the soft hush of the barn, Emily found herself sharing things she'd never said aloud, how her marriage unraveled, how every failure seemed to stick to her skin, how the loneliness after her brother's death never really faded. "Buck didn't just save my bakery," she whispered. "He saved me from believing I wasn't worth saving." In the weeks that followed, Buck grew stronger. The vet marveled at his resilience, scars knitting, eyes brightening. His limp remained, a permanent reminder of everything he'd survived. But he learned to nicker at familiar voices, to accept gentle hands and music drifting from Mike's guitar. Slowly, the town itself began to change. People who once crossed the street to avoid the bakery now gathered outside, sharing stories and food. Teenagers painted a mural of Buck on the side of Prairie Hearth, his image crowned with sunflowers and a red bandana, the word hope painted bold across his chest. The bakery became a haven for outcasts and healers alike. Veterans, bullied teens, single moms, those haunted by losses of their own. Emily started a support group for trauma survivors, Buck as their gentle mascot, his story the thread that wove them together. One evening, as Emily brushed Buck's coat, Sheriff Torres stopped by, hat in hand. "Never seen this town change so fast," he said, voice quiet. "You gave people something to believe in again, Emily. Sometimes that's the hardest thing." Emily smiled, feeling both pride and humility. "He did most of the work. I just listened." Torres nodded, understanding. "Sometimes that's all any of us can do." Late one night, Emily wandered through the bakery, now bustling again, filled with laughter and music, and sat beside Buck in his stall. She realized that her own heart had changed as much as the town. By opening herself to a wounded horse, she'd rediscovered her own capacity for strength, connection, and hope. She thought of her brother, her father, all the broken places inside her. She knew now that healing wasn't about erasing the scars, but living with them, finding beauty in the resilience it took to keep going. David, too, seemed lighter. By standing up for Buck and Emily, by sharing his story instead of burying it, he found peace he hadn't known in years. Together they honored both their own journeys and Buck's. The story became something larger than any of them. People from nearby towns came to hear it. News crews filmed Buck's slow, steady return to health. Messages poured in from across the country. Letters of gratitude, donations for the support group, stories of other therapy animals who'd helped save a life. And at the center of it all was Buck, a horse who'd been cast aside, who'd carried pain and judgment, and who, with the help of a broken but stubbornly loving community, found a new beginning. Weeks slipped by, carrying with them the last echoes of summer storms and the first cool promise of autumn in Los Alamos. Prairie Hearth Bakery was alive again, more than it had ever been. The windows glowed golden late into the evening, the air thick with laughter and music, the sweet scent of bread and cinnamon pulling people together, old friends and newcomers alike, all drawn by a story they'd come to claim as their own. Buck, still limping but healed enough to venture from the equine center, wore a garland of wildflowers and a hero sash lovingly stitched by Lily and her friends. His photograph now graced the bakery walls, standing proud beside Emily, sunlight in his mane, eyes wise and soft. Each day, Emily opened the doors just before dawn, Buck trailing behind her, his presence both a comfort and a gentle challenge, reminding everyone that healing doesn't erase scars, it celebrates survival. On a brisk Saturday morning, the bakery overflowed. Emily set up a table near the window, Buck's nose occasionally nudging her elbow as she fussed with coffee mugs and stacks of thank you cards. Veterans' families brought photos, teenagers sketched cartoons of Buck and pinned them to the bulletin board. Mrs. Garcia's grandson recited a poem he'd written, his voice shaking but proud. Even Linda Harper attended, quieter now, her edges softened. She placed a bouquet of sunflowers at Buck's feet and after a long moment gave Emily a brief, grateful nod. That afternoon, as the sun burned low over the desert, Emily gathered the crowd inside for a few words. She looked around, faces familiar and new, wounds visible and hidden, and felt a trembling in her chest, not of fear, but of overwhelming gratitude. Buck didn't just save my bakery, she began, voice steady and sure. He saved me from a life of isolation. He reminded me what it means to care about something outside yourself, to risk being hurt in order to love, to trust, to connect. A Buck's scars, my scars, your scars, they aren't something to be ashamed of. They're proof that we endured, that we still choose hope, even when hope seems far away. She glanced down as Buck pressed his nose into her hands, his eyes closing in trust and contentment, as if he understood every word. The crowd was silent, some with tears shining, others with soft smiles. Emily continued, "What happened here? What Buck gave to this town shows us the power of empathy, the bravery of second chances, and the incredible gift of being seen for who we truly are, not just for what we've survived." Buck's journey became a symbol, his name synonymous with redemption. Children pointed him out to visitors, travelers stopped to hear the story, and donations poured in from across the country. Emily and David started a small fund, Buck's Second Chances, to provide for retired therapy horses and local trauma survivors. A community mural blossomed on the bakery's brick wall, Buck, rearing under a night sky, surrounded by sunflowers and the words, "You belong." Inside, the support group grew, veterans and lost teens, single parents and lonely elders, all drawn to the warmth of Prairie Hearth. Emily watched as strangers became friends, as laughter returned to a town that had almost forgotten it. She realized the bakery had become something more, a safe haven, a place where everyone's story mattered. One evening as dusk painted the sky, lavender and gold, Emily slipped outside with Buck. She let her hand rest on his neck, breathing in the familiar scent of grass and sunlight. "We made it, old friend," she whispered. "We're still here." She thought of her brother, her father, every broken place she'd carried. None of those wounds had vanished, but now they lived alongside joy, purpose, and a deep, sustaining sense of belonging. The lessons from Buck's journey, resilience, redemption, community, echoed far beyond Los Alamos. Newspapers picked up the story, school counselors requested visits. Buck became the town's unofficial mascot. And in quiet moments, when Emily listened to the wind in the grass or the laughter inside the bakery, she knew the greatest legacy was invisible. The courage people found in themselves, simply by witnessing Buck's and her own refusal to give up. At the end of the season, Emily hosted a celebration on the bakery's patio. Twinkle lights glowed above long tables, music drifted in the air, and Buck stood at the center, content, letting children drape him in flower crowns and ribbons. Emily raised her glass, her voice strong and clear. To second chances, to not giving up on ourselves or each other, and to the hope that no matter how lost you feel, someone, somewhere, sees you, believes in you, and will stand by your side. The crowd cheered. Buck nickered softly, as if in agreement. Before the evening ended, Emily posted a sign on the bakery's front door, a call to action, not just for Los Alamos, but for anyone who passed through. If you believe in second chances, like and follow our story. Share your own journeys of resilience and kindness, because you never know who you'll inspire next. And so the story of Buck and Prairie Hearth carried on. A beacon for the lost, a balm for the wounded, a reminder that sometimes the soul you save is your own, and sometimes it's a brown horse waiting quietly at your door, reminding you that hope is always worth coming home for.